sitting down, I have a question for you. Do you know what a potter is? And by that, I don't mean Harry Potter. Do you know what a potter is? Lily, do you know what a potter is? A potter is someone who molds clay. Exactly. And do you know what this is? What is this? It's a pottery wheel. Yeah, it's a pottery wheel. And today I'm going to show you how to make something on the pottery wheel. And the children's time and my sermon are all going to mesh into one. So if you get tired and want to go back and sit with your families, you can. But I invite you to sit here just so you can watch the whole time. Okay? And why am I doing this? I've never done this at this church before. Why do you think I'm doing this? That's right, exactly. In that first lesson, we hear from Isaiah that God is a potter and we are the clay. And that image of God speaks to me because I am a potter too. And I thought, what a better way to help all of us explore that image of God and what that means for us in our lives than to show you, right? Sometimes that's the best teacher. Okay, helps us to better understand. Have you ever felt lonely or sad or discouraged? Have you ever felt those things? I hear some yeses out there. Yes, I think many of us have felt that way. And when I feel that way, I want God to remind me that God loves me. I need guidance and encouragement and sometimes some direction, all those things. And the prophet Isaiah, that's who wrote the book of Isaiah, was feeling that way. He was feeling discouraged and kind of lumpish, actually, kind of like this clay, just kind of like the God's people knew God had been faithful in the past, and they wanted God to remind them that God was faithful still. And the reason why they were feeling that way is because their city and their town were destroyed. They had to live many years in exile in a different country. And when they came back, everything was destroyed. Their houses, their city, even their church was destroyed. And it made them feel like maybe God had forgotten them. Like God was hiding God's face from them and not paying attention anymore. And so they wanted to remember that God loved them and was with them. And Isaiah says, God, if you would just tear open the heaven and come. But God was quiet. They didn't hear God's voice. And that made them even more discouraged. Well, before you make anything out of clay, you have to wedge it. And this clay was lovingly wedged by my friend Christina. And the reason why you wedge clay, it's similar to kneading bread, but you wedge clay to make the texture consistent and also to get rid of any air bubbles. Because if you have an air bubble in your clay and you go to make something, a lot of times you can't center it. And even if you do center it, sometimes when you're making a shape, it'll collapse on you. And sometimes even when you make a shape and you take it through the whole process and you fire it, it can explode in the kiln if it has a air bubble in it. And you don't want that to happen. Because that not only messes up your work, but it messes up everybody else's work that's around it in the kiln. So when I make pottery, I'm usually quiet. And for me, it's a lot like prayer. And it's often quiet in our studio, even though there's 10 people working. Sometimes it's quiet because we're all deeply involved in that creative process. And it was in a silence like that that the prophet Isaiah prayed, "Yet you, O God, are the potter, and we are the clay, the work of your hands." Do you ladies want a piece of clay that you can hold on to? Want to do that? Yeah? Okay. Now this is clay that needs to be fired, so if you make a creation that you just can't live without, let me know. And not everybody likes the feeling of clay on their hands because it can kind of get dry. And if you don't want your clay anymore, you can just give it back to me or put it in the box and I'll take care of it. Cascade and Sage, do you want to play with some clay? Sage, how about you? Yeah? Just squish it in your hands. Can you hand that to Sage, please? Okay, thank you. Have this on now. Question number 2, am I plugged in? You check it out, please. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right. I don't know what you did. Okay, one of the things that I like about making art, whatever kind of art that it is that it's an expression of who I am. And I think that's why I love art by other people too, especially people that I know, because it's a reflection of who they are. It's like you put a piece of yourself in the things that you create. And I think about if God is the potter and we are the clay, then we too have that creative piece of God within us. And that we too are works of art. Our lives are works of art. The Bible tells us that in the beginning, in the midst of the darkness, in the midst of a whirling mass of chaos, that God created. Yep, it's whirling, isn't it? That's right. And that we were created out of the earth, out of clay, and that God breathed life into us. And sometimes life can feel a lot like a swirling mass of chaos. And that's why, try that again, art is such a sign of hope. Because sometimes we feel like the darkness is painful. And Michelangelo is quoted as saying, "In every stone there is a soul, and that his job as an artist is to release it." So, even in a lump of clay, there is soul. And my job as a potter is to release it. Now, I don't usually talk when I do this, so it just need to spend time and center my clay. When I center my clay, I'm aware of myself. I'm aware of, I'm aware that you kind of have to be centered to be able to center clay. There are those days when your teacher is wise to say, Beth, why don't you go make a snowman? When you just can't get it and you're getting frustrated. So a good potter always knows how to use her clay. Is it reversible, Christina?
Yes.
I think I have it going. Did I have it going the wrong way? Is that? Yeah, okay, now I've got it going the right way. Thank you. I did flip it. All right, thanks.
It's comfy.
That's right. Sometimes we need a little help from our friends, right? Okay. Let's get this centered. I like to think that maybe in those times in our lives where we feel like God is silent, like we're wondering if God is really there, that maybe those are God's quiet and creative times. Times when, like a potter pouring over her clay, that God is quietly pouring over us, preparing to make something purposeful, something beautiful out of our lives. Okay, so once your clay is centered, you have to open it. You girls want to take a peek? You can come a little closer. You have to open it. And I open the clay by pushing my thumbs in. There's lots of different ways that people do that. But I like to put my thumbs in there just like that. And as we know, being open is not enough. I have to stretch this clay a little bit so that I can reach my hands in it to actually shape it. And the same is true of us as people of faith. We also have to be willing to be stretched and pulled so God can reach God's hand and shape us into something. Okay, so now I'm ready to slow my wheel down a little bit and pull up the sides. And to pull up the sides, I have to give pressure and pull up. Kind of at the same time, if I gave too much pressure on one side, I could put my hands right through the clay and just completely mess it up. But I think, like, isn't that what we do as God's people? We gather together to lift one another up, to support one another when the pressure from the outside or the inside feels like it's getting too great. We're there for one another to support and hold one another in love. And as I'm throwing, I'm kind of shaping too. And to shape a cylinder, you, again, depending on what kind of shape you want, if you want a shape that goes like this, you put a little bit more pressure on the inside and support on the outside. If you want it to come more like this, then you push more on the outside and support it on the inside. And even if I were, and I don't intend to mess up this piece, but even if I do, like a good potter, I will scrape it off the wheel and take it back to the wedging board and rework it and use it again. And what an amazing image of our lives, how even when we mess up, and sometimes even the clay is even easier to use after it's been thrown once on the wheel. But God can take us and rework us and use us and make us into something purposeful and even beautiful. girls are in the splash zone. You get a little bit of water on you. Sure, it's right there. And if you need to wipe off your hands, you can use my towel. Sometimes you need to do a little trimming to get it a little bit more even. Okay, what's this kind of looking like?
A bowl?
Yeah, it kind of looks like a bowl. But I'm making a bowl shape, but I'm not making a bowl. Any guesses as to what I might be making? A pot, yes. I am making a pot. Oh, did you think about that for a minute? Maybe this kind of finished up a little bit better. And once when I was making, it was the biggest bowl I've ever made in my life, I knew I had my wheel going too fast, but I just was so excited I couldn't stop and slow it down, and it kind of caved in, and I was really disappointed. And my teacher came over and said, well, you know what you can do is you can let it dry a little bit. She hung it upside down, and she said you can reshape it. And so I did, and I discovered the beauty of being able to create altered vessels. And it's one of my favorite pieces because that's not what I intended to do, that's not what I expected to do, and yet, again, with the guidance of her wisdom, I was able to make it into something even more beautiful than I had even imagined. And I, again, like to think of that as how God is at work in our lives, that God can do things with us and for us far beyond anything that we even have imagined. So this piece, thank you, is not done. It has to dry, and then I have to trim it, and then I need to fire it, and then glaze it, and then it gets fired again before it can be used. But what I'm making, anyone want to have a guess as to what I might be making?
How do you get it off the wheel?
Pardon me, how do I get it off the wheel? A wire tool, and then you just push it off, and then I have a board that I put it on so it dries. Anyone now want to take a guess as to what I'm making? Making the top part of a chalice, and I made this this year. The glaze covered up the date on there, but yeah, I'm making a chalice that we get to use, and I'm hoping to get it done before Lent. And I'll make it purple so that it's the season of Lent. You have a nice blue one here for the season of Advent. But it's not perfect. It's a little lumpy, a little bumpy, and if you look at it close enough, you can see that it's not perfectly symmetrical. But neither am I. And dare I say, neither are you. And yet, God can still use us in powerful ways to be the body of Christ. And that through us, others can experience that precious presence of Christ among us. And that's how we come before God, a little lumpy, a little bumpy, and yet created with great love to offer ourselves as a gift to others. Life can sometimes be a bit messy, but God is with us. Even in times when we feel like God is silent, God is still with us, at work in powerful ways in our lives that often we don't even know until we look back, sometimes even years and years and years later. God is always with us, like a potter pouring over her clay.
Okay,
shaping us to be God's people. That's good. That's good. Forming us to be a blessing. To live our lives as if we are indeed a creative piece of art, a work of God. This is our hope and our prayer during the Advent season. That in times of darkness, in times of chaos, in times of loneliness and silence, when we long for that presence of God to be made real in our lives, God breaks into our world. Not always in ways that we expect, but always with great love and tenderness, with great faithfulness. And this love changes us. It changes us because it's always shaping us into the body of Christ. Amen. Thanks for coming up, ladies and gentlemen. You can take your clay with you and go back and sit down. I'm just going to finish this up while we sing the hymn of the day.